Growing up, my father was the best storyteller. He was an archaeologist who worked in Egypt, and so he filled his tales with pharaohs and pyramids and grand adventure. I never wanted story time to end. And so every night, as he would wrap up, I would ask for just one more, and he would agree, sort of. He would walk to the door, turn back to me, and say, "Okay, last one." Once upon a time, they lived happily ever after. The end. And turn out the light. Every night. I protested, of course. That didn't count. He left out everything that a story was supposed to be. But he would reassure me. It was bedtime, and his story had all the requisite parts: a beginning, a middle, and a happy end. How could I argue with that? Decades later, I found myself thinking back to that bedtime ritual. I was grappling with another story that felt similarly incomplete. Only this time, I realized I could channel what I had heard about archaeology from my dad to fill in the gaps. I was completing my doctorate in developmental psychology, and I had been awarded a summer fellowship to study a trove of interviews with college students between the 1940s and the end of the 1960s. It was fascinating to hear the stories of their daily lives against the backdrop of World War II and Vietnam. And as I made my way through these documents throughout the summer, there were a couple of pages of a different transcript that didn't belong. They were on thicker cardstock with purple mimeograph ink. They stood out, and I wanted to know where they had come from. Ultimately, what I realized is that there had been another study in the 1970s. A team of a dozen researchers had spent 10 years interviewing college students about their lives, collecting the stories of what they were going through at this pivotal moment. And then they abandoned the study. Nobody had heard those recordings for 50 years. I am at heart my father's daughter, and I realized that maybe if they still existed, I could find them. It took me almost a year. I dug through basements and attics of old campus buildings. I interviewed people who had worked at the university in the past, ultimately went through hundreds of dusty boxes from our university archives until I found them. Recordings of young people coming of age in the 1970s. I couldn't play them because 50 years of cold storage had taken a toll. I couldn't even lift them out of the box, they were so brittle. It took a team of sound engineers to digitize and lift those voices so that we could hear them once again. I was anxious for them to finish because I knew that if I could listen to their voices, it might change what we understood about the college experience across generations. I enlisted my colleague, Dr. Nancy Hill, and together we started to listen to those tapes. We set out to document what was different between college students of the 1970s and those in our classrooms in the 2020s. And what we heard stunned us. The stress, the loneliness, the pressure to have life figured out by graduation in an uncertain job market that we heard on the recordings sounded exactly like our students today. We paused. What could we make of this? As developmental psychologists, what we realized is the process of growing up and asking the big questions, the who am I and what do I want out of my life? Who do I want with me on the journey? The emotion of figuring those things out actually connects us all in a way that we weren't expecting. We wrote a book about what we found, and we were getting ready to end the study when we realized we had one unanswered question. What happened to the students on those tapes? The last time we'd heard them, they were 22, about to graduate, excited and nervous for the next chapter as they stood on the cusp of adulthood. Today, they'd be in their 70s. What would they make out of this time capsule and the opportunity to hear their voices at 19, 20, 21 years old? We sought permission to reopen the abandoned study, and once it was granted, we tracked down the original participants. Those who were still living were invited to rejoin us, almost 50 years since their first interview. This time, the world had changed, and so we invited them to join us on Zoom. We asked them two overarching questions. The first, what do you remember about college? And listen to them retell their stories. And next, what's been going on for the past 50 years? And we listened to them fill in the gaps of what their story had been. And when we were done, we invited them to listen to their original recordings, to meet themselves across time. We thought they would jump at the opportunity. Every single one of them hesitated. Should I be embarrassed? Do I sound naive? Can my spouse hear what's on that tape? They weren't quite sure, but they all opted in, curious to know what they had said and what the experience had been like. And when they came back to us to debrief on the experience, it turns out that they were shocked by what they heard because they had misremembered their own stories. One told us, I remembered thinking it would all work out. I remembered having confidence. I didn't remember being so scared. Another reported, I remembered what happened, but I had no idea how it had felt. Every one of them had polished up their tale for posterity, rounding out the emotional ups and downs of navigating the path to adulthood. And that mattered. It's not just that their story was too simple. It's that their simple story had not prepared them to help the young people in their own lives. They told us, I wish I'd heard this before when I was raising my kids, teaching my students, talking to my grandkids. I always felt like I couldn't relate to what they were going through. And now I see I actually could. Rounding out those ups and downs, the emotional valleys, it was important for another reason. When we retell our stories in too simple of a way, we leave out the part that young people most need to hear. I know this firsthand. I struggled in college. I took a leave of absence, I transferred schools. I felt like I was always doing it wrong and that no one could relate. I was so bruised by that experience, it took me 25 years to go back for my first college reunion, and I work at my alma mater. I agreed to go back only because I had the chance to share this research, and I hoped it might help my former classmates. And so as I stood on stage telling my story about my own uncertainty in the journey, I wondered if it landed. And I got off stage, and they told me, I thought I was the only one. At first, I was surprised, but I shouldn't have been. I spent those same 25 years studying the college experience and teaching college students. And I know that when my students struggle, every single one of them thinks that they're in it alone. But they're not. And we can help them see that if we tell the full story. My father's bedtime ritual was never about storytelling. It was a way to end the night with this little girl. But it's no way to tell our stories. And so here is my challenge for all of us. The next time we tell our stories, let's work hard to put the middle part back in. When we can tell the whole story, not just the highlight reel, we give young people the gift of knowing that they're not in it alone. Thank you.